Welcome to the special guest host series of the Trauma Therapist Podcast, where I'm going to be handing over the mic to some incredible guest hosts. In each episode, you'll hear fresh perspectives and unique insights to inform and inspire you, and all the while keeping the heart of this podcast alive. So sit back and enjoy.
Hi, I'm Dr. Leslie Ellis, and I'm here today with Ailey Jolie. And this is part of the Trauma Therapist Podcast, the guest hosting series that I was honored to be invited to. So thank you, Guy, for inviting me. And I'm really excited to introduce you to Ailey Jolie, who I've known for almost 10 years, first as a student, but now I think, this is one of the cases where the student may have surpassed the teacher in terms of her learning and studies and the things she's putting out in the world. So the overarching theme is embodiment. And I don't think I know a single person who has studied, lived in the body, thought about the body, ways to help people connect with their bodies, especially when they've been disconnected through trauma, as Ailey. So she was first in my Master's of Counselling program at Adler University. That's where I first met her. And then I think she basically took almost everything I taught, and mainly a focusing oriented 2-year certification program with the Focusing Institute. So she learned about Jen Lynn's beautiful way of listening inside. And she's also taken, and here's the list, and I'm going to have to look at it because there's so many things that she's trained in. I don't remember them all. So somatic experiencing, EMDR, compassion inquiry, internal family systems, sex therapy, a trauma recovery master's certificate from Harvard Medical School. She can treat eating disorders. She's a yoga teacher. And I don't think that even covers everything, but she's also now a chartered psychologist in the UK, where she's currently living and working. And the slogan on her website kind of sums up her main theme that she really lives by, which is that inside your body is the wisdom needed to live your most awakened and authentic life. And she does help people do that. And she's an example of that. And I also wanted to share some of her words from her website, because Ailey's a beautiful writer, and I think this is best coming from her. She says, I come to the psychotherapy profession with transparency. As a human, I have a colored history of triumph and trauma. Performing with the Royal Moscow Ballet, wearing the crown of Miss Canada, modeling overseas, a brief cameo on Sesame Street, were the highlights the world saw. What was hidden during my youth were my experiences of sexual exploitation and violence. My experiences of trauma have informed my academic and educational choices. The areas of expertise I possess as a psychotherapist are where I've personally alchemized my pain into peace. And I love that last phrase. And I just wanted to know if you could say more about that process of alchemizing your pain into peace.
Really beautiful question. It's also, I'm just noticing the resonance of what it feels like to have someone else and someone I admire so deeply read those words back to me. And even inside, I think there's a little alchemy happening right now. But when I think of alchemizing all of those experiences, I really just go back to some quintessential moments of my own journey coming home to my body and what that has looked like, and also how foundational my body was in my experiences of both trauma, but in the reconciliation and the alchemy of that. So during my experiences of trauma, I always had movement as a foundational piece kind of sprinkled in there. I got to dance with the Royal Moscow Ballet when I was a little kiddo. And so I always had dance and movement as a way of being present in my body and kind of moving through what was placed inside my body in regards to trauma energy and all that sticky, icky stuff and all the emotions. I had this outlet. And when I look back on, the process of alchemy and moving through trauma, I go back to those moments of doing this thing at a very young age, of learning how to breathe into my body or flex my toes or strengthen a leg or feel this type of tenacity through my muscular system. as a way of kind of discharging or integrating or processing the traumatic charge or arousal, we would call it. And that was deeply unconscious. And then because I spent so much time in psychotherapy in various forms, I got really curious. And that's what has led me to explore really all of the modalities that have benefited me and I've gotten something from. I wanted to understand how they led me from point A to point B, or some from point A to point F. Like how did I change? What was this? And that really fueled and continues to fuel the educational choices that I make.
Yeah. It sounds to me like you reverse engineered your healing process, and that you've always had a connection with your body because of, the dance. It's such a fine-tuned way of being with your body. But I know as an athlete, I've also done that, but I can say that there is also that connection, but it can also be, there can be a way it disconnects you, or that you can learn to be tough. And I know that over the time that I've known you, even I can feel that there's been a shift in this deepening of embodiment, and also of learning how to help others as well. And so I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the modalities. I know there are many, but the ones that have really helped you in that process, and how you would articulate that.
I'm judging my answer in my mind right now. Because it's not the modality that I would necessarily reference point, or one would think would have been the most profound. But being in long-term Jungian psychoanalysis has been the probably most embodied practice I've been in, even though I don't think either of my analysts were like deeply embodied people per se. There was something about how they held the space that allowed me to soften, and the parts of me that were holding on to the trauma to finally meet connection with another person. And in my list of CV, I've spent the months in meditation practice. I've done the ayahuasca. I've done all the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And I'm being in long-term 5 times a week Jungian analysis was what allowed my armor to finally go, yeah, I can just be here now. I don't need to do any of this other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's not about a specific, and I like this actually, it's not about specific getting into the body or feeling into the, specific sensations necessarily, but about that deeply human experience of feeling supported and safe and loved, actually. I think when you're in such intensive therapy, it's like a reparenting or a recalibrating of our sense of safety in the world. So I can see how that would be transformative. And
Absolutely.
So there's that. And what other things, it's obviously that was the deepest healing for you. And what other kinds of things in your beautiful list of expertise is something you'd highlight?
Another one that always comes to mind is right at the start. And this is when I was leaving a domestically violent relationship. I would have been about 18, and I was in therapy, and my therapist very unconventionally decided today that we were not going to talk. And she put me into this little room, and she put on this film around domestic violence and sexual violence. And she just made me watch it. It was a 25-minute little film. And she took me into the room, and she was like, I sat you down with that because I wanted you to hear what I hear when you speak to me. And that was such a shattering moment, because it was this deep type of psychoeducation where I was confronted with these really large feminist intersectional systems and my own story in a way that I could actually take it in, because we had a long-term relationship. We had been working on things. Bless her, she was really trying to support me in domestically violent relationship. And I was very much no, everything's fine. But then sitting in that room alone, watching this psychoeducation movie from the 1960s probably was that moment. And that one always stands out to me too, because it's so wildly unconventional, but was so deeply feminist and exactly what I needed.
So she had a really strong, correct intuition about what you needed to really jolt you into realizing the terror of what you were in. And I know that you also, as part of your work with sexual violence, victims of sexual violence, and some of the most challenging kinds of cases. And so part of it obviously comes from having experienced it yourself and knowing the terrain. But I wonder what that's like for you and what kinds of things you have found to be most helpful with this very challenged scenario that you're confronted with in therapy work.
Yeah. The antidote or the remedy that my system needs in working so heavily in sexual violence is having practices of pleasure or presence or peace or ease. And so now that is a practice that I have in my work. I have two practices when I see someone who every day when I see someone who has sexual violence one is having some type of practice or play. Like I need to go play in whatever way that works for me. And another one, because I mostly work with those who are femme identifying, is I need to connect to a masculine figure. And those two things they do keep me refreshed and available and my system open to work with a population that can be very tiresome and very grueling on someone's, not only their psyche, but their body as well.
Yeah, I know. We know about how our nervous systems mirror each other's. And so even though you're upholding some of this, embodiment and groundedness and joy, it's still, I know it personally as well, it can take a toll on your body. And so it sounds like you do have many forms of self-care. And you also mentioned to me earlier about learning about sex therapy, of a certificate in sex therapy, and how incredibly, surprisingly helpful and joyful those practices are to just really reconnect with pleasure. And for people who have not experienced their bodies as a fun place to be, that this is a really helpful avenue as well.
Absolutely. I don't think I would have ever trained as a sex therapist. It wasn't on my radar. It wasn't my general inclination as a therapist, but after spending time doing that certificate program at Harvard, I became very curious about what is my skill set as a therapist and as a human to experience pleasure. What are the steps here? What is the protocol? How do we bring this in? Maybe therapy doesn't need to be so challenging or hard all the time. Maybe it can be really playful. Maybe my personality can really be in the room. Where are those glimmers for my clients? And getting trained as a sex therapist and the two supervisors I had really brought that into my practice by really bringing that out in me and how they showed up as supervisors, because they really embodied this playful energy all the time. Even when we were in the depths of painful stuff, they still had this effervescence that I really appreciated.
Yeah, I do love that paradigm shift in working with, I guess anybody who comes to therapy comes in with some degree of pain or something they want to work through. But there's this focus sometimes on the problem, exclusively on, do I have to relive this? Do I need to metabolize it? And yes, I think it's important for some people to tell the story and to actually, feel some of the frozen places and bring them some life and light. But that isn't everything. If it's all just, sitting in the soup of the worst of it, I agree with you. It doesn't feel good, probably as a therapist, but probably also as the client or patient, because I notice people think they need to come and talk about all the troubles, but what you're talking about is, the word used is repatterning. So it's having experiences of joy and pleasure and fun and playfulness as part of the work and taking that into your life. And so I'm wondering how you get there, just some ideas. I know it can be different for every person, but what are some of the main ways that you find to help people go from a traumatized place to a place where their body can experience joy and aliveness?
Mm-hmm. I really love this question because it's one that I'm constantly asking myself whenever I sit across from someone who is in a more traumatized place in their body or in their life, of what is the glimmer of connection or a new pattern or a new possibility that I can present as their psychotherapist or just as a human across the room for them right now. And so I do this in lots of fun little ways. I used to have a therapist who wore the quirkiest shoes. So I'll do little things like wear quirky shoes or have funny jewelry, or like I have every single different type of texture in my office because I'm like just all the weird patterns. So for me, it's very intentional, even in how the space is curated environmentally. And then it goes just down into this kind of more intimate moments of where can we just have like a little space of reprieve? Where can we notice that the pattern actually isn't playing out here? Where can we, the two of us, maybe connect around the sun that's outside today? And these little moments, then it's just kind of expanding on them in a way that's very similar to what Peter Levine talks about titrating and orienting, that we can orient to pleasure. And I ensure that that is a theme throughout the time that I spend with clients, big and small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that feels good. I mean, it should feel good. I think Jenlyn said that too as well, that, that therapy should feel good and you should track the good feelings. So another thing I know about you is that in addition to your therapy work, you also put a lot of information out in the world. And so I just have really enjoyed the information you've put out there. And I know we'll put your social media contacts below here somewhere so people can look you up. And, the other thing I've noticed is in your writing is there's a strong feminist and political theme that runs through it. And I'm just, wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, about how, the world can sometimes make it difficult to really be fully embodied, and, just what you have to say about that.
I have so many things that I could say about that. I'm like, cool. One of the reasons why I am so obsessed and passionate about embodiment is that because I deeply believe that our bodies are not only inherently political, the first site of political change. And if we can move our focus away from the noise that is outside there and actually turn into our internal voice and stay deeply connected and committed to that, that is how we will see systematic change outside in the world. Because when we actually connect to ourselves, we're forced to feel the interconnectedness we have with other people, the ecological crisis that we're in. Like, it just is a kind of a Rolodex for me. And so there is a really strong political and cultural lens in how I write, because for me, somatics is a deeply social justice inspired perspective. And I was really taught to think that way in doing my master's in Somatic Studies at Pacifica, and taught less to think about it as a practice to release or to shake or to move. That's a part of it. That's somatic awareness. But somatics itself is inherently political and cultural, and a critique, because our bodies hold social structures inside them. What I do notice in my private practice, when I am with clients and I bring this stuff in, or I sprinkle a little bit of like, hey, that may be why your body feels this way, there's oftentimes this deep type of softening of, oh, yeah, because of that structure, I've been led to believe that I completely control my reality. And that's why I'm blaming myself for that thing that happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And actually, I don't. There's systems outside of me that are moving my life in directions, and I'm not responsible for every single thing that happens, but I do have to have, there's a line of accountability of I choose what happens next after that horrific thing happened. And so I do find that there's oftentimes this really beautiful somatic softening when we bring in the systemic and how it's woven into all facets of our existence.
Yeah, that just takes all the pressure away, doesn't it? Like, is there something that you would say in particular to people who feel like they can't connect with their body, or they feel up against something that feels like the body isn't really welcoming or doesn't feel like home. And how do you begin with someone who's really uncomfortable going in?
Yeah. I would first very gently and very kindly remind them that if you can't connect to your body, that means all the systems outside of both of us have worked and they have done their job well. And it's not a personal failing in any way if you can't feel your toes when you wiggle them inside your shoes, or you're unsure of your fullness or hunger cues or thirst cues if you can't pull those apart. That just means that you've really been led into the cultural and societal narratives that overvalue the mind and all its beautiful techniques and strategies and undervalue the wisdom of the body. So really, again, depersonalizing it. And then starting that beautiful practice, as I kind of named earlier, of how can we orient to a feel-good sensation in the body? Most people can find something that doesn't feel good. Like that's easy. Not too hard to find. That's pretty easy. But can we actually feel something that feels good? And then starting to expand that, because if we're creating a new relationship with anyone and we go into it and we're like, oh, it feels icky and sticky and gross and makes me feel anger inside, we're not going to have a lot of incentive to like keep showing up to that relationship. But if we are building a new relationship and we acknowledge, oh, I feel a little light or a little bubbly or some joy, we're probably going to have a greater buy-in to like keep showing up to the relationship. And so that's the second piece. The third piece is really honoring, as much as you are trying to create a relationship with your body and get to know it, your body is trying to create a relationship with you. And like all relationships, that's going to take trust. It's going to take time. It's going to take rapport. It's going to take repetition. And you're going to have to repeat those steps many, many times. And losing connection to your body after you've created connection is just a part of the process. I would always invite people to get really curious about how their body actually speaks to them, because there is this conception that it's going to be in sensation, or maybe I connect to my body and that's when I feel an emotion move through me. But I know for myself that I'm actually most deeply embodied when I have really felt sense-oriented dreams. That for me is like, Ailey, you are doing a very good job during the rest of your waking hours being connected to your body because you went to sleep tonight and your dreams told you things. They gave you little tidbits of information. And so I always just really invite people to be curious and to honor the body speaks to all of us in very different ways at very different times in our lives. And to just keep an open mind that your body might not whisper to you. It may dream to you, or it might move, or it might shake. And that's all totally okay.
Yeah. Well, you chose my favorite avenue. You know that about me, that dreaming is such a beautiful entree into the body. I am a very big fan of that answer and of you. I am so privileged to have had you as a student, and I really I'm grateful for you coming and spending the time speaking with us. And I think, there's only just more great things to come. I look forward to more of your writing and your book and all of the things that you do in the world to make it a better place for our bodies. So thank you so much, Ailey.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute delight.